So you are welcome to session 5, Instrumental and Operant Conditioning, part 1. In part 4, in session 4, we did something on classical conditioning. We continue this time around to look at instrumental and operant conditioning as part of the discussion on learning, Psyc 337. My name is Inus Abdul Nasiru, Department of Psychology, University of Ghana, Legon. As an overview, just to draw attention to the fact that sometimes behavior is learned when one gets rewarded immediately after exhibiting such a behavior. There's a kind of association between the behavior and the reward. The same way, if the consequence is followed by a consequence that is not pleasant, it becomes associated with the behavior, and so that behavior is not repeated. This is another example of learning by association, but this time it's between response and consequences. So we expect that by the end of the session, you'll be able to explain what instrumental learning is, or trial and error learning is, and you'll be conversant with operant conditioning, and explain the strategies used in forming and strengthening operant behaviors. As a result of that, the topics to be discussed include the Thorndike's instrumental learning, and then B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning, and then topic 3, we're going to learn how to form and strengthen operant behavior. Relevant texts and chapter reading materials are available on Sakai. So let's look at the first topic, topic 1, the Thorndike's instrumental trial and error learning. All right, so this is Edward Lee Thorndike's instrumental learning. So this kind of learning is referred to as instrumental because the behavior of an individual or the organism is instrumental in producing various outcomes, which could be positive or negative. The learning of reinforced stimulus response connection occurs through trial and error. So through trial and error, an individual or an organism exhibits behavior and is rewarded or punished based on the kind of behavior. So this outcome gradually gets the individual or the organism to learn. So gradually there is random errors, and these are eliminated and learning takes place. So Thorndike uses a puzzle box. So we're going to discuss the mechanism. Thorndike studied the behavior of cats trying to escape from homemade puzzle boxes. So how did he go about it? So the cats were put in the box. When first constrained in the boxes, the cats took a long time to escape. It took some time for them to escape. But with experience and sometimes ineffective responses occurring less frequently, and sometimes successful behaviors or responses occurring more frequently, the cats escaped in less time over successive trials in the experiment. Based on the experiment, 3 key laws are propounded: the law of effect, the law of exercise, and the law of readiness. Let's take each of these one after the other. The law of effect states that responses that are followed by pleasant consequences are strengthened, whilst those that are followed by unpleasant consequences are weakened. So with this law, if a behavior or a response is followed by pleasant consequences, the behavior is strengthened. And those behaviors that are followed by unpleasant consequences are weakened or gradually eliminated. That is the essence of the law of effect. Now the law of exercise. The law of exercise states that repeated practice of a stimulus-response association strengthens it. In other words, there is this saying that practice makes perfect. So when you repeatedly perform an action or engage in the behavior, the likelihood is for there to be perfection. But is that really the case? It was realized later that practice alone was not enough for improvement. There must be feedback. Feedback is what really brings about the improvement in behavior, because with feedback, corrections are made and new things are learned from the feedback, so mistakes are not repeated. So it's rather the feedback that helps in bringing about improvement and not necessarily only the practice. Then the last law, the law of readiness, says that an individual learns better if the individual is physically and psychologically prepared. So readiness is very important. It's important because even with the other laws, if the individual is not really ready, is not going to have the kind of sound mind to engage in activities. So Thorndike believed that readiness is an important condition of learning. So that is it for topic 1 on operant condition. Let's look at topic 2 with B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. So B.F. Skinner formulated operant condition, which is a more detailed analysis of Thorndike's conception of learning. The term operant is used because an organism has to operate on the environment to produce a certain effect. There is a basic principle that underlies this conditioning. That is, if behavior is repeatedly followed by outcomes that are pleasing to the learner, the behavior is likely to be performed more often under similar conditions. On the other hand, if the behavior is followed by unpleasant consequences, it is less likely to be repeated. This principle is very important. Remember this because you'll be seeing it often. B.F. Skinner uses what is known in psychology as Skinner's box, and this is Skinner's box. Let's describe it and see how it works. So a hungry rat was put in the box, the Skinner's box, and after roaming about, it will accidentally press a lever which allows it to move out to get food in another chamber. Skinner observed that after a period of time, the rat could get the food quickly by pressing the lever in a short time to get out. So when you look again at the box, you see the various parts are labeled where the rat is pressing the particular lever so that food pellets drop, then moves out to get that. And then at the other side too is the, let me display this. Let me just point this. The other part is the part that if the rat gets close to, it gets kind of shock, because this generates is a cord that is connected to generate shock for not emitting the correct behaviors. But here it presses the lever and food pellets drops to get to benefit by way of reward or reinforcement. All right, so basic components of operant conditioning. Basic components of operant conditioning. Skinner then identified the following components which facilitate operant conditioning. Reinforcer. So here he describes it as any event that follows behavior and strengthens the behavior. So here reinforcers can be positive or negative. So positive reinforcer could be those events whose presentation follow an operant behavior and increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring again under the same circumstances. For instance, when in an exam you make an A, you are likely to increase your desire to learn hard to receive more good grades, because if you feel that you learn to get the A, you will learn again, so the A will follow. as a positive reinforcer. So negative reinforcers, on the other hand, refer to aversive event whose removal follows an operant behavior and increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring again under the same circumstances or similar circumstances. For instance, when a footballer has headache, that headache, when taken care of, maybe through treatment, medicine or medication, it gets to play better when the headache is totally gone. It's important to note that reinforcers, whether they are positive or negative, always strengthen behavior. Whether positive or negative, always strengthens behavior. We'll explain that further. And we also have primary reinforcers and secondary reinforcers. Whereas primary reinforcers are innately satisfying stimulus, secondary reinforcers are conditional reinforcers or event that gains its reinforcing power through its association with the primary reinforcers. So with primary reinforcers, examples are food, water, and other biological needs. Whereas the secondary reinforcers could be those that are associated or that could be used to get primary reinforcers. So money is a secondary reinforcer because you can use it to acquire primary reinforcers such as food and water. Now let's look again at the other aspect, punishers. Punishers. A punisher is an aversive stimulus which decreases the behavior that it follows. So if there is a behavior followed by an aversive stimulus, that behavior is likely to be reduced in terms of how often it will occur. In the same way with reinforcers, punishers also could be positive or negative. So positive punishers. In a situation where a stimulus is presented after a response that it follows, it decreases this response that it follows. So a positive punisher adds aversive stimulus to the environment and ensures that it deters the person exhibiting that behavior from repeating the behavior that warranted it. So that's positive stimulus, presentation of or adding an aversive stimulus that one doesn't like. Negative punisher, on the other hand, is a stimulus whose removal weakens the response that it follows. That is, negative punishers take away pleasant stimulus away from the environment so as to weaken certain behaviors that we don't like. For instance, a child misbehaves, that behavior is not acceptable, such as maybe fighting with the siblings. It's a behavior that we don't want to occur again. So we want to punish this using the negative punisher. We will take away certain pleasant stimuli from the environment of the child so that he will not engage in fighting again. So an example could be you targeting the child's favorite program on television and not allowing the child to watch that program and then link it with the misbehavior. So the child will learn that, oh, I wasn't allowed to watch this, my favorite program, because I was fighting my siblings. So it's negative punisher, removing something pleasant from the environment so that you minimize the occurrence of certain behaviors. So in terms of table, we just want to look at the summary of what we just discussed about operant responses and in terms of punishment, in terms of reinforcement, whether positive or negative. So we'll look at positive reinforcement. It's about presenting a stimulus with the intention of increasing the response that it will follow. So that is positive reinforcement. So you take this stimulus presentation. So it presents a stimulus like a reward to a child so that you get the child to engage in a behavior that you want the child to exhibit. So it increases the occurrence of behavior That's positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is removal of a stimulus, but with the intention of increasing the response. So you remove stimulus, take away, for instance, a headache, so that a behavior, a good behavior that it follows can occur again. As we mentioned in the case of a footballer who had a headache, and having the headache taken care of, removing that stimulus so that the football playing behavior will increase. So that's negative reinforcement. With punishment, positive punishment is presentation of stimulus, like we mentioned, presentation of stimulus with the goal of decreasing operant response. For instance, maybe not acceptable, but maybe caning a child or punishing a child in a way to minimize certain behaviors. So you present the punishment with the purpose of decreasing the behavior. With the negative punishment, you remove the stimulus. Here you remove the pleasant stimulus so that you minimize the occurrence of certain behavior. Like we gave an example of a child who fights the siblings and is punished. That behavior is punished by not allowing the child to watch the favorite program. So you remove that favorite program from the child's environment. You don't allow him or her to watch the program so that you minimize fighting. You minimize fighting with the sibling. That's negative punishment. Negative punishment. When you read further in the reading list that is attached in Sakai, you'll be able to get some further details. So by this, just put this topic to an end and look at the next topic, which is topic 3. Topic 3 looks at forming and strengthening operant conditioning. Forming and strengthening operant conditioning. Forming and strengthening operant conditioning. We'll look at the first one, which is shaping, or the method of successive approximation. This refers to the use of selective reinforcement to bring about certain desirable changes in the behavior of an organism or an individual. So reinforce each subskill and reinforce improvements in performance so the expected behavior is exhibited. So with this, is the process of shaping a particular behavior, gradually reinforcing the various steps that move the individual towards exhibiting the acceptable behavior. That's why it's called the method of successive approximation, at the end of which you shape a particular behavior. For instance, a child's learning behavior can be shaped in the home environment. Anytime the child picks a book, reinforce it, because picking the book is one of the steps that will get the child to go and sit down. And when the child sits and opens the book, you reinforce that behavior. Gradually, you get the child to develop the behavior of learning. You shape the child's behavior, learning. So the next is timing of reinforcement. This goes to strengthen the behavior, the timing. So when should you reinforce an appropriate behavior? There are several arguments as to when this should occur. But whatever it is, there should be close temporal proximity between response and reinforcement so that the person sees the relationship between his or her behavior and the reinforcement. So the person will then learn to associate the reinforcement or the pleasant consequence with the behavior. So timing is very important. The size of reinforcement is also seen as an important point in forming operant behavior. If the size or amount of the consequence is large enough, it will increase the rate at which an individual will form the operant behavior. The same way, the type of reinforcement used. Some reinforcers may be much more appealing to certain individuals than others. It's therefore important to know what appeals to the person and use that as a reinforcer. Use that as a reinforcer. So it depends on the individual student, or a pupil in class 1 may prefer an eraser as reinforcement. So a good behavior with eraser coming as reinforcement is likely to increase learning behavior in the child. Whereas you can use the same eraser to reinforce someone who is in the university and provides appropriate response. So the type of reinforcement is a very good factor in forming operant behavior. So with this, we've come to the end of this session 5 of learning. Thank you very much.